The gunshot wound in his leg hadn't killed Henry Logan, but the fever that followed might have if his daughter hadn't ridden 3 hours through dangerous territory to fetch help from the nearest town with a trained nurse. The year was 1878, and in the dusty mining settlement of Eureka, Nevada, medical care was as scarce as water in August. Henry lay in his bed, barely conscious, while his 12-year-old daughter Emma tried desperately to keep the wound clean with boiled water and torn strips of cotton, just as her late mother had taught her before consumption took her 2 years prior. Rebecca Carson arrived on a Thursday afternoon, her brown leather medical bag clutched firmly in one hand as she climbed down from the wagon that had brought her from Carson City. She was 26 years old, tall and lean with auburn hair pulled back in a practical bun, and green eyes that assessed everything with a clinical precision born from years of nursing during the tail end of the Civil War and its aftermath. The driver who had brought her collected his payment and turned his horses around immediately, unwilling to stay even one night in this rough mining town, where fortunes were made and lost on the turn of a card and the glint of silver in a dark tunnel. Emma rushed out to meet her, dust swirling around her worn boots. "Please, miss, you have to help my father. He is burning up with fever and I do not know what else to do." Rebecca studied the girl's tear-streaked face and felt something tighten in her chest. She had seen too many children lose their parents during the war, too many families torn apart by violence and disease. "Take me to him immediately. How long has he had the fever?" 3 days now, maybe 4. I lose track. The wound happened 6 days ago." Emma led her toward a sturdy log cabin at the edge of town, one of the better-built structures in Eureka. He got shot breaking up a fight at his claim. 2 men were arguing over boundaries, and when Papa tried to settle it peaceful-like, one of them pulled a gun. The bullet went clean through his thigh. Rebecca's mind cataloged the information as they walked. 6 days with a gunshot wound, 3 to 4 days of fever. Infection had set in, no doubt about that. The question was whether it had spread to the blood, and if so, how far. She had seen men die from less, seen gangrene turn healthy limbs black and putrid. But she had also seen men survive against impossible odds when they had something worth fighting for, and this Henry Logan clearly had his daughter. The inside of the cabin was cleaner than Rebecca had expected. Someone had taught Emma well. The floors were swept, the windows let in good light, and the dishes were stacked neatly near a well-maintained stove. But the smell hit her immediately, that sickly sweet odor of infection that every nurse learned to recognize and dread. Henry Logan lay in a bed near the window, his face flushed with fever and slick with sweat. He was a large man, broad-shouldered and strong, probably in his early 30s, with dark hair plastered to his forehead and several days' worth of stubble on his jaw. His chest rose and fell with rapid, shallow breaths, and when Rebecca pulled back the blanket covering his injured leg, she had to steel herself against the sight. The wound was badly infected, the flesh around the entry and exit points red and swollen, with streaks of darker discoloration spreading outward. Pus oozed from both holes, and when Rebecca gently pressed the surrounding tissue, Henry groaned in his fevered sleep. "Emma, I need you to boil water. As much as you can manage, and bring me clean cloths, the cleanest you have." Rebecca set down her bag and began rolling up her sleeves. "Do you have any whiskey in the house?" "Yes, miss. Papa keeps some for medicinal purposes. He does not drink much otherwise." "Good, bring that too. And I will need salt if you have it." As Emma hurried to gather the supplies, Rebecca opened her medical bag and began laying out her instruments. Forceps, scissors, scalpels, all carefully cleaned and wrapped. She had bottles of carbolic acid for disinfection, laudanum for pain, and various powders and tinctures she had prepared herself. The medical community was still arguing about germ theory and antisepsis, but Rebecca had seen enough during her years as a nurse to know that cleanliness saved lives. She examined Henry more thoroughly, checking his pulse at wrist and throat, lifting his eyelids to check his pupils, pressing her ear to his chest to listen to his lungs and heart. His pulse was too fast, thready and weak. His breathing was labored, but his lungs sounded clear, which was a blessing. The infection had not spread there yet. "Can you save him?" Emma stood in the doorway, her arms full of clean linens, her eyes wide with fear. Rebecca met the girl's gaze steadily. She had learned long ago that honesty, even when brutal, was better than false hope. "I am going to do everything I can. The infection is serious, but it has not yet spread to his blood as far as I can tell. If I can clean the wound properly and get the fever down, he has a fighting chance. But Emma, you need to understand that these next few days will be critical. He might get worse before he gets better." The girl nodded, her jaw set with a determination that reminded Rebecca of soldiers half again her age. "Tell me what to do." For the next several hours, Rebecca worked with the focused intensity of someone fighting death itself. She cleaned the wound with carbolic acid diluted in water, ignoring Henry's fevered thrashing as the antiseptic burned through infected tissue. She used her forceps to remove debris and dead flesh, creating fresh bleeding that would help flush out the infection. She packed the wound with clean cloth soaked in a solution of salt water, then bandaged it snugly. Emma assisted without flinching, holding her father down when necessary, bringing fresh water and clean bandages, learning quickly what Rebecca needed before she had to ask. The girl was remarkably composed for someone so young, though Rebecca could see the fear lurking beneath her capable exterior. When the wound was finally cleaned and dressed, Rebecca turned her attention to bringing down the fever. She had Emma help her strip away Henry's sweat-soaked clothes and sponge him down with cool water. She got laudanum and water down his throat, though he was barely conscious enough to swallow. She brewed willow bark tea for its fever-reducing properties. Night fell. Rebecca sent Emma to bed with strict instructions to sleep while she could, because they would be taking turns watching over Henry through the coming days. The girl protested, but finally gave in when Rebecca pointed out that her father would need her rested and alert. Alone with her patient, Rebecca settled into a chair beside the bed and allowed herself a moment of weariness. She had been traveling for 3 days to reach Eureka, sleeping in rough stage stops and dirty hotels, eating whatever food was available. Her back ached, her feet hurt, and her eyes burned with exhaustion. But this was the work she had chosen, the calling she had answered when she was barely 18 and the war was tearing the country apart. She studied Henry Logan's face in the lamplight. Even ravaged by fever and pain, he was a handsome man. Strong features, a firm jaw, lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled often, or had before tragedy struck. Emma had mentioned her mother had died 2 years ago. Rebecca tried to imagine what it must have been like for this man, losing his wife and being left alone to raise a daughter in this harsh, unforgiving land. Henry stirred, mumbling something incoherent. Rebecca leaned forward and placed her hand on his forehead. Still burning hot, but perhaps not quite as scorching as before. Small mercies. "Rest easy," she said softly, though she doubted he could hear her. "You have a daughter who needs you. You are not allowed to die." Through the long night, she kept her vigil, changing the cool cloths on his forehead, checking his wound for fresh bleeding, monitoring his breathing and pulse. Somewhere around 3 in the morning, his fever broke temporarily and he opened his eyes, looking directly at her with surprising clarity. "Angel," His voice was rough, barely above a whisper. Rebecca found herself smiling despite her exhaustion. "No, I am afraid not, just a nurse. Rebecca Carson. Your daughter brought me from Carson City to tend your wound. Emma." The name came out with such love and concern that Rebecca felt her heart clench. "Is she safe?" "She is sleeping in the next room. She has been taking excellent care of you, but she needed help. The infection was beyond what she could manage alone." Henry tried to move, groaned at the pain in his leg. "How bad?" "Bad enough, but not hopeless. The bullet went through clean, which is fortunate. The infection is what we are fighting now. You need to stay still, stay quiet, and let your body heal." He studied her face for a long moment, his dark eyes surprisingly alert despite the fever. "Thank you for coming, for helping Emma. I know Eureka is not an easy place to reach. It is what I do." Rebecca adjusted his blanket, checking the bandage on his leg. "Now save your strength. You have a long recovery ahead." But Henry reached out and caught her wrist with surprising strength. "If something happens to me, Emma has an aunt in Sacramento, Sarah Logan. Promise me you will make sure Emma gets to her." "Nothing is going to happen to you," Rebecca said firmly. "I did not travel all this way to lose you now. But yes, if it comes to that, I promise." He held her gaze a moment longer, then released her wrist and closed his eyes. Within moments, the fever pulled him back under, and Rebecca was alone again with the sound of his labored breathing and the soft ticking of the clock on the mantel. The days that followed established a rhythm. Rebecca and Emma took turns nursing Henry, sleeping in shifts, maintaining the household while fighting to keep the infection at bay. Rebecca changed his bandages twice daily, cleaning the wound with meticulous care, watching for any sign that the infection was spreading. She forced fluids down his throat when he was conscious enough to swallow, spooned broth into his mouth, administered laudanum when the pain grew too intense. Emma proved to be an invaluable assistant. She cooked simple but nourishing meals, kept the cabin clean, fetched water from the well, and watched her father with unwavering devotion. In the quiet moments, she told Rebecca about their life, about her mother who had loved books and music, about how her father had brought them to Eureka 3 years ago hoping to strike silver and build a better future. "Papa has a good claim," Emma explained one afternoon while they were preparing vegetables for stew. "He found a decent vein last year, enough to keep us comfortable. He has been saving money to send me to a proper school back east, but I keep telling him I would rather stay here with him." Rebecca chopped an onion, blinking against the sting in her eyes. "Education is important. Your father is right to want that for you. I know. Mama always said the same thing, but I do not want to leave him alone." Emma's voice grew small. "Especially not now. What if something happens and I am hundreds of miles away?" "Your father is going to recover," Rebecca said with more confidence than she felt. The infection was stubborn, the fever persistent. Henry would improve for a few hours, enough to speak coherently and take some food, then slide back into fevered delirium. "And when he does, you should listen to him about school. He wants you to have opportunities he and your mother might not have had." Emma looked at her with eyes older than her years. "Did you go to school? To learn nursing?" "I learned during the war, actually. I was 18 when Fort Sumter fell, living in Philadelphia with my parents. My father was a doctor, and when the casualties started pouring in, he needed help. He taught me everything he knew." Rebecca paused, remembering those blood-soaked years, the endless parade of wounded and dying young men. "After the war ended, I continued training at a hospital in New York. I have been nursing ever since." "You have a husband, children?" Rebecca shook her head. "No. There was a young man once before the war, but he died at Antietam. After that, I devoted myself to my work. It seemed more important than anything else." Emma considered this. Do you ever get lonely? The question, asked with such innocent directness, hit harder than Rebecca expected. Sometimes, she admitted, but everyone gets lonely sometimes. The key is finding purpose and meaning in what you do. Before Emma could respond, a groan from the bedroom sent both of them hurrying to Henry's side. He was awake, more alert than he had been in days, and the fever flush on his cheeks had faded slightly. "Emma," he said, his voice stronger, "I heard you talking. Papa." Emma threw herself at the bed, but Rebecca caught her gently. "Careful. His leg is still healing. You can hug him, but gently." Emma carefully embraced her father, and Rebecca saw tears sliding down both their faces. She busied herself checking the wound, giving them a moment of privacy while she examined the injury. The swelling had started to subside. The redness was less angry. Fresh pink tissue was beginning to grow at the edges of the wound. Small signs, but encouraging. "Miss Carson." Henry's voice pulled her attention back to his face. "How long have I been out?" "This is the 6th day since I arrived. 12 days total since you were shot. The infection was severe, but you are fighting it off. Your body is strong." "I do not feel strong. I feel like I have been trampled by a team of horses." Rebecca allowed herself a small smile. "That is a good sign, actually. It means you are aware enough to feel pain, which means the fever is not consuming all your resources. You are turning a corner." Over the following week, Henry's improvement was steady if slow. The fever subsided, the wound began to heal, and he graduated from broth to solid food. Rebecca kept him on strict bed rest despite his protests, knowing that any strain could tear open the healing tissue and set back his recovery. During this time, Rebecca found herself enjoying conversations with Henry more than she expected. He was intelligent and well-read, unusual for a mining man. He had been a schoolteacher in Ohio before his wife's illness drained their savings and forced him west in search of fortune. He spoke of his dreams for Emma, his hopes that the silver claim would provide enough to give her the life her mother had wanted for her. Elizabeth was the daughter of a professor, Henry explained one afternoon while Rebecca changed his bandage. "She married me against her family's wishes because I was just a poor teacher. When she got sick and we lost everything paying doctors, her family would not help. Said she had made her choice. After she died, I could not stay in Ohio. Too many memories, too much pain. So I brought Emma here, hoping to start fresh." Rebecca cleaned the wound with practiced efficiency, noting how much better it looked. The infection was nearly gone, the tissue healthy and pink. "You have done well by your daughter. Emma is a remarkable young woman. She is. So much like her mother." Henry winced slightly as Rebecca applied fresh bandage. "And you, Miss Carson, what brought you all the way to Nevada?" "The need for trained nurses out here is desperate," Rebecca said, finishing the bandaging. "In the cities back east, there are hospitals and medical schools. But out here, people die from infections and injuries that could be treated with proper care. I wanted to go where I was needed most." "That is admirable, also somewhat dangerous for a woman traveling alone." Rebecca met his eyes steadily. "I can handle danger. I have seen worse than anything the West can offer." Something shifted in Henry's expression, a deepening respect. "I believe you have." As the days passed and Henry grew stronger, Rebecca found herself noticing things about him that had nothing to do with his medical condition. The way his eyes crinkled when he smiled at Emma's stories. The deep timbre of his voice when he read aloud from the books that lined a shelf in the cabin. The strength in his hands, calloused from hard work but gentle when he touched his daughter's hair. She told herself it was simply the natural bond that formed between nurse and patient, the intimacy of caring for someone at their most vulnerable. But she could not quite ignore the flutter in her chest when he thanked her for something, or the warmth that spread through her when their hands accidentally touched. Rebecca had not allowed herself to feel anything like this in years. After losing Thomas at Antietam, she had locked away that part of herself, focusing entirely on her work. Love meant vulnerability, meant the possibility of devastating loss. She had seen too much loss already. But Henry Logan was making her remember what it felt like to want something beyond the next patient, the next medical challenge. And that terrified her more than she cared to admit. Nearly 3 weeks after her arrival in Eureka, Henry was finally strong enough to stand with support. Rebecca and Emma helped him out of bed, one on each side as he put weight on his injured leg for the first time. "Easy," Rebecca cautioned. "The muscle has been idle for weeks. You need to rebuild your strength slowly." Henry gritted his teeth against the pain but managed a few steps, leaning heavily on Rebecca and using a crutch Emma had fashioned from a sturdy branch. Sweat beaded on his forehead from the effort, but he was smiling. "That is enough for today," Rebecca said firmly when he tried to take another step. "You have done well, but do not push too hard." They got him back to bed, and Emma went to prepare lunch, leaving Rebecca alone with Henry. He caught her hand before she could step away. "I do not know how to thank you," he said quietly. "You saved my life. Emma's life too, in a way. If I had died, she would have been alone out here." Rebecca felt heat rising in her cheeks. "I was doing my job. Any competent nurse would have done the same." "No." Henry's grip tightened slightly. "You did more than that. You cared for both of us, not just my wound. You have been patient with Emma, kind to her, teaching her things. You have kept this household running while fighting to keep me alive. That goes beyond duty." She should pull her hand away, should maintain professional distance. But Rebecca found herself unable to move, caught in the intensity of his gaze. "You are a good man, Henry Logan," she said softly. "A good father. You deserved someone fighting for you." For a long moment they simply looked at each other, something unspoken passing between them. Then Emma's footsteps on the porch broke the spell, and Rebecca gently extracted her hand, busying herself with straightening his blankets. That night, lying in the small guest room Emma had vacated for her, Rebecca stared at the ceiling and tried to sort through her tangled emotions. She had been in Eureka for nearly a month now. Henry was recovering well, would soon be able to manage with just Emma's help. Rebecca would need to move on, find other patients who needed her skills. The thought of leaving made her chest ache in a way that had nothing to do with exhaustion or worry. She was falling in love with Henry Logan. Perhaps had been falling since that first night when he had called her an angel, when he had shown such fierce love for his daughter even through the haze of fever. Falling in love with his strength and gentleness, his intelligence and humor, the way he looked at her like she was something precious and rare. And that was impossible. She was a traveling nurse, dedicated to her work. He was a widowed father building a life in a rough mining town. They had no future together. Rebecca turned over, punching her pillow into a more comfortable shape, and tried to convince herself she believed that. The next morning brought a complication Rebecca had not anticipated. She was helping Henry exercise his leg, supporting him as he walked slowly around the cabin when a knock came at the door. Emma opened it to reveal a tall, well-dressed man with graying hair and sharp blue eyes. "Mr. Logan," the man said, his voice carrying an edge of authority. "I heard you were on the mend. I am glad to see it is true." Henry's whole body tensed beside Rebecca. "Mr. Dalton, what brings you here? Business, of course." The man stepped inside without invitation, his gaze sweeping over Rebecca and Emma before returning to Henry. "The Silver Creek Mining Company is still interested in purchasing your claim. Given your recent injury, I thought you might be more amenable to our offer." "I already told you last month, my claim is not for sale." That was before you nearly died. Dalton's smile did not reach his eyes. You have a daughter to think about, Logan. What happens to her if you are killed? These mines are dangerous places. Accidents happen all the time. Rebecca felt Henry's arm trembling with barely suppressed anger. She stepped forward, putting herself slightly between the two men. Mr. Logan is recovering well and will be back to full strength soon. Perhaps this is not the best time to discuss business. Dalton looked at her as if noticing her for the first time. And who might you be? Rebecca Carson. I am the nurse caring for Mr. Logan. Ah, yes. I heard he had brought in someone from Carson City. Expensive proposition, paying for a private nurse. Another reason to consider our offer, Logan. The company would pay fair market value plus 10%. Enough to set you and your daughter up comfortably back east, away from all this danger and hardship. My answer is still no, Henry said firmly. Now, if you would excuse us, I need to rest. Dalton's expression hardened. You are making a mistake. The Silver Creek Company always gets what it wants one way or another. I would hate to see you get hurt because of stubbornness. Was that a threat? Rebecca demanded, her voice sharp. Just a statement of fact, Miss Carson. These are rough times. Accidents happen. Think about it, Logan. I will be back for your answer next week. He left, and the cabin felt suddenly cold despite the afternoon sun. Emma rushed to close the door behind him, her face pale. Papa, I do not like that man. Neither do I, sweetheart. Henry sank into a chair, his injured legs stretched out in front of him. The Silver Creek Company has been trying to buy up all the independent claims in this area. They have gotten most of them, through either generous offers or intimidation. My claim sits right in the middle of a rich vein they want to exploit. Rebecca knelt beside him, checking his leg to make sure the confrontation had not strained it. Is he dangerous? I do not know. Probably not directly. He is too smart to get his own hands dirty. But he has men working for him who are not so careful. Henry ran a hand through his hair. I hate that Emma is exposed to this. It is part of why I wanted to send her east to school, get her somewhere safe. I told you, Papa, I am not leaving you here alone. We will talk about it later. Henry caught Rebecca's concerned gaze. Do not worry. I have dealt with men like Dalton before. I will handle it. But Rebecca was worried. She had seen the calculating look in Dalton's eyes, the barely veiled threat in his words. Henry was still weak from his injury, in no condition to defend himself if the Silver Creek Company decided to apply more direct pressure. That night, after Emma went to bed, Rebecca found Henry sitting at the table, going over papers by lamplight. He looked up as she approached. Cannot sleep. Too much on my mind. She sat down across from him. Henry, maybe you should consider his offer. Not because I think you should give in to threats, but because it might truly be safer for you and Emma. He set down his pen, regarding her steadily. Is that your medical opinion or personal concern? The question caught her off guard. Both, I suppose. Rebecca. The sound of her first name on his lips sent a shiver through her. He had been careful to call her Miss Carson until now. This claim represents 3 years of backbreaking work. It is Emma's future, her education, everything I have been trying to build for her since Elizabeth died. I cannot just give that away because some company man makes veiled threats. What good is a claim if you are dead? The words came out sharper than she intended, edged with a fear she had not meant to reveal. Henry reached across the table and took her hand. I am not going to die. You worked too hard to save me to let that happen now. Rebecca looked at their joined hands, his large and calloused, her smaller but strong from years of nursing work. I would not have worked so hard if I had known you were going to throw your life away on stubborn pride. It is not pride, it is principle, and providing for my daughter. He squeezed her hand gently. "Besides, I have something else worth living for now." Her heart stuttered in her chest. "Henry, I know this is complicated. I know you are a nurse, that you travel where you are needed. I know I am just a mining man with a half-healed bullet wound and a daughter to raise. But Rebecca, these past weeks, getting to know you, watching how you care for Emma, how you smile when you think no one is looking, how fiercely you fight for your patients. I am falling in love with you." The confession hung in the air between them. Rebecca wanted to pull away, to remind him of all the reasons this was impossible, but she could not make herself let go of his hand. "I am falling in love with you too," she whispered, "and it terrifies me." "Why?" "Because I lost someone I loved before. Because I swore I would never let myself be that vulnerable again. Because you and Emma deserve someone who can stay, who can build a life here, and I do not know if I can be that person." Henry stood, moving carefully around the table to stand beside her chair. He cupped her face in his hands, tilting it up to meet his gaze. "I am not asking you to make any promises. I am just asking you to give us, a chance. Stay in Eureka, not as my nurse but as yourself. See if what we feel can grow into something real." Rebecca closed her eyes, feeling his warmth, his strength, the steady beat of his heart. She thought of all the lonely years she had spent traveling from patient to patient, never putting down roots, never allowing herself to want more than the satisfaction of saving lives. She thought of Emma's bright spirit and Henry's gentle strength, and the way this cabin had started to feel like home. "I will stay," she said, opening her eyes to meet his. "For now, we will see where this leads." Henry smiled, a genuine, joyful expression that transformed his whole face. Then he leaned down and kissed her, gentle and careful, as if she were something infinitely precious. Rebecca kissed him back, allowing herself to feel, to want, to hope for the first time in years. When they finally broke apart, both breathing slightly faster, Henry rested his forehead against hers. "Thank you for giving us a chance. Just promise me you will be careful," Rebecca said. "About Dalton and the Silver Creek Company, I do not trust him, I promise. I am not going to do anything reckless. I have too much to live for now." The following weeks brought a new rhythm to life in the Logan cabin. Henry continued to heal, growing stronger each day until he could walk without a crutch, and began making short trips to his mine to assess the damage from his long absence. Rebecca officially took up residence as a guest rather than hired nurse, though she continued to help the few other people in Eureka who needed medical care. She and Henry courted with Emma as their enthusiastic, if sometimes exasperated, chaperone. They took walks in the evening, Henry showing Rebecca the harsh beauty of the Nevada landscape. They sat together reading books aloud while Emma did her schoolwork. They talked for hours about everything and nothing, learning each other's stories, dreams, and fears. Rebecca found herself fitting into their life with surprising ease. She taught Emma more advanced nursing skills, shared her books, and helped with the household tasks. She learned to bake bread in the wood stove, to preserve vegetables for the winter, to mend torn clothing. Domestic skills she had never particularly valued suddenly became acts of love, small ways of caring for this family that was becoming hers. But the shadow of the Silver Creek Company hung over their happiness. Dalton returned twice more, each time increasing his offer and making his threats less veiled. Other independent miners in the area began selling their claims, some willingly, others under mysterious circumstances. One man's equipment was sabotaged, another had his cabin burned down while he was away. Henry remained firm in his refusal to sell, but Rebecca could see the worry weighing on him. He hired a man to watch the mine at night, started carrying a pistol when he went to work, and made sure Emma never walked anywhere alone. Then, 2 months after Rebecca's arrival in Eureka, everything came to a head. Henry had gone to the mine early one morning, promising to be back by afternoon. When sunset came and he had not returned, Rebecca felt dread coiling in her stomach. "Something is wrong," she told Emma. "Your father would not stay away this long without sending word. Maybe he just lost track of time working. No, he has been too careful since the threat started." Rebecca grabbed her medical bag and the rifle that hung above the door. "Stay here. Lock the door behind me. If I am not back in 2 hours, ride to town and get the sheriff." "I am coming with you." "Emma, no, it could be dangerous." "He is my father. I am coming." Rebecca recognized the stubborn set of Emma's jaw. The girl was her father's daughter. "Fine, but you stay behind me and do exactly as I say." They took the path to the mine, the setting sun painting the rocks in shades of red and gold. The mine entrance was a dark slash in the hillside, timber supports framing the opening. As they approached, Rebecca heard voices from inside, rough and angry. She motioned for Emma to stay back, then crept closer. Inside the mine, 2 men had Henry pinned against the rock wall. She recognized one of them as a known troublemaker who worked for the Silver Creek Company. Henry's face was bloodied, and he was struggling against their grip. "Last chance, Logan," the man was saying. "Sign over your claim or we will make sure you have an accident. Real tragic. And then your pretty daughter will be all alone out here. Who knows what might happen to her?" Rage, pure and cold, flooded through Rebecca. She stepped into the mine entrance, rifle raised and aimed. "Let him go. Now." The men spun around, startled. The one not holding Henry reached for his gun, but Rebecca fired a shot that ricocheted off the rock near his head. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space. "The next one goes into flesh," she said, her voice deadly calm. "I am a trained nurse. I know exactly where to shoot to cause maximum pain without killing. Now let him go." The men released Henry, who slumped against the wall. They started toward the entrance, but Rebecca blocked their path. "You are not going anywhere. Emma, get the sheriff. Tell him we have the men who have been terrorizing the independent miners." "You cannot prove anything," one of the men blustered. "I just witnessed you assaulting Mr. Logan and threatening his daughter. That is enough to get you arrested. And I imagine once the sheriff starts investigating, he will find connections to all the other accidents that have been happening." Rebecca kept the rifle steady, drawing on the same steely calm that had gotten her through battlefield hospitals. "Your employer made a mistake sending you. He should have done his own dirty work." The sheriff arrived with Emma and several armed townsmen. The 2 company men were arrested, and in the days that followed, they turned on Dalton, giving testimony about the intimidation campaign in exchange for lighter sentences. Dalton fled Eureka before he could be arrested, and the Silver Creek Company's reputation was so damaged that they pulled out of the area entirely. But Rebecca's triumph was short-lived. When they got Henry back to the cabin and she examined him by lamplight, her heart sank. The men had beaten him severely. She cleaned his cuts and bruises, checked for broken ribs, and forced herself to stay professional even as her hands trembled with residual fear and anger. "You could have been killed," she said quietly as she bandaged a cut above his eye, "but I was not. You saved me, again." Henry caught her wrist, his grip weak but determined. "You were magnificent, Rebecca, terrifying and magnificent. I was scared out of my mind." She blinked back tears. "When you did not come home, when I found those men hurting you, I thought I might lose you. I have already lost one man I loved, Henry. I cannot go through that again." "Then do not leave." He pulled her closer, ignoring his injuries. "Stay with me, with us. Marry me, Rebecca. Build a life here in Eureka. We need you. I need you." Emma appeared in the doorway. Say yes, Rebecca, please. You are already part of our family. Make it official. Rebecca looked between them, this man who had taught her to open her heart again and this girl who had become like a daughter to her. She thought about the life she had been living, always moving, never staying, holding everyone at a distance to protect herself from pain. But safety was an illusion. Pain found you whether you ran from it or not, and love, real love, was worth the risk. Yes, she said, feeling joy and terror and hope all mixed together. Yes, I will marry you. Henry kissed her then, careful of his split lip but full of passion and promise. Emma threw her arms around both of them, laughing and crying at the same time. They were married 3 weeks later in a small ceremony in Eureka's church, with Emma as the beaming witness and half the town in attendance. The miners had taken to Rebecca after she helped save several of them from injuries and illnesses over the past months, and they showed up to celebrate one of their own finding happiness. Rebecca wore a simple blue dress, her best, with wildflowers Emma had gathered that morning. Henry stood tall and handsome in his Sunday suit, his injuries mostly healed. When he slid a plain gold band onto her finger and promised to love her all the days of his life, Rebecca felt something shift in her chest, a loosening of the tight control she had maintained for so many years. She was home. Finally, impossibly, wonderfully home. Their first year of marriage brought adjustments and challenges, but also deep happiness. Rebecca continued her nursing work, treating patients throughout Eureka and the surrounding area. She became known as the best medical help for 100 miles, and people would travel for days to seek her care. Henry's mine proved profitable enough to provide a comfortable life. He hired 2 reliable men to help with the labor, allowing him to spend more time with his family. Together, he and Rebecca made plans for Emma's education, deciding to bring in a tutor from back east rather than send the girl away to school. Emma flourished under their combined attention, growing into a confident young woman with her father's intelligence and her late mother's grace. She studied literature and mathematics, learned nursing from Rebecca, and became skilled at running the household. But more importantly, she bloomed under the love and security of having 2 parents again. Rebecca discovered that she had a talent for creating home. The cabin she had first entered as a stranger became a warm, welcoming place filled with books and laughter, good food and music. She planted a garden, learning which vegetables could survive the harsh Nevada climate. She made curtains for the windows and quilts for the beds. She turned the spare room into a proper medical office where she could treat patients. But the greatest joy came 18 months into their marriage, when Rebecca discovered she was pregnant. She had thought she might be too old at 28, had worried that years of hard nursing work might have damaged her body somehow. But when she missed her monthly courses and began feeling queasy in the mornings, she allowed herself to hope. Henry was overjoyed when she told him. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing like a boy, then set her down carefully as if she might break. "We are going to have a baby," he kept repeating. "A baby." Emma was equally thrilled, already planning everything the baby would need, offering to help with whatever Rebecca required. The girl had lost one mother. The prospect of a new sibling filled her with excitement rather than jealousy. Rebecca's pregnancy was relatively easy, though she worked right up until the last month, unable to abandon her patients just because her belly was swelling. The other women in Eureka, most of them hardened mining wives, rallied around her with advice and hand-made baby clothes, welcoming her fully into their community. On a cold February night in 1880, Rebecca went into labor. She had attended dozens of births, knew exactly what to expect, but experiencing it herself was entirely different. Henry stayed by her side, holding her hand through the contractions, letting her squeeze hard enough to leave bruises. Emma, now 14 and mature beyond her years, assisted with the birth with steady hands and unwavering support. Just before dawn, Rebecca delivered a healthy baby boy. He came into the world wailing, red-faced and furious, absolutely perfect. Henry cried when he held his son for the first time, tears of joy and relief and overwhelming love streaming down his face. "What should we name him?" Rebecca asked, exhausted but happy, watching her husband cradle their child. "Thomas," Henry said, looking at her with such tenderness it made her heart ache. "After the young man you lost, so that his memory lives on and so our son knows that love is always worth the risk." Rebecca felt tears spilling down her own cheeks. "Thomas Logan, it is perfect." They settled into the chaotic joy of life with a newborn. Thomas was a demanding baby, colicky and loud, but he was theirs. Rebecca marveled at every tiny finger and toe, every milestone and change. She had spent years caring for other people's children, and now she had one of her own to nurture and protect. Henry was a devoted father, walking the floor with Thomas in the middle of the night, changing diapers without complaint, singing lullabies in his deep voice. Emma was a wonderful big sister, patient with the babies crying, always ready to help. The cabin that had once housed a grieving widower and his daughter now rang with new life. As Thomas grew from infant to toddler, Rebecca sometimes thought back to that day when she had first arrived in Eureka, tired and dusty, facing a desperately ill patient and his frightened daughter. She had come to heal a wound, never imagining she would find a family, a home, a love that transformed her entire life. Henry's mind continued to produce well enough to provide security. They expanded the cabin, adding more rooms for their growing family. Rebecca trained 2 younger women in Eureka in basic nursing skills, creating a small network of medical care in the area. Emma, now a lovely 16-year-old, attracted suitors, though she insisted she was not ready to marry, preferring to continue her studies. 3 years after Thomas's birth, Rebecca discovered she was pregnant again. This time, she gave birth to a daughter they named Elizabeth, after Henry's first wife. It felt right to honor the woman who had given him Emma, who had loved him first. Elizabeth was a calmer baby than Thomas had been, with her father's dark eyes and her mother's auburn hair. She fit into their family seamlessly, another piece of the puzzle falling into place. Life was not always easy. The mining business had its ups and downs. Medical emergencies sometimes pulled Rebecca away from her family at inconvenient times. Emma eventually did marry, a kind young surveyor who had come to Eureka to map the territory, and seeing her stepdaughter settled and happy was both joyful and bittersweet. But through all of it, Rebecca and Henry's love remained steady, deepening with each passing year. They built traditions together, celebrated holidays with their growing family, weathered storms both literal and metaphorical. They learned each other's moods and needs, fought and made up, supported each other's dreams. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Henry took Rebecca on a picnic to a spot overlooking the valley, leaving the children with Emma for the afternoon. They sat on a blanket under the endless Nevada sky, eating bread and cheese, watching clouds drift past. "You ever regret it?" Henry asked. "Staying here, giving up your traveling work?" Rebecca turned to him, seeing the silver threading through his dark hair, the lines that life and laughter had carved into his face. She thought about the woman she had been when she arrived in Eureka, armored in professionalism, afraid to feel, running from connection and love. "Not for a single moment," she said honestly. "You and the children are the best thing that ever happened to me. This life we have built together is worth more than all the patients I might have treated if I had kept running. I love you, Rebecca Logan. More today than the day I married you, and I will love you even more tomorrow." She kissed him, tasting joy and commitment and the future stretching out before them. "I love you too, always." As the years continued to unfold, Rebecca sometimes worked with expectant mothers and remembered her own pregnancies. She treated minors' injuries and thought about that first desperate fight to save Henry's life. She watched her children grow and thrive and felt grateful for every ordinary moment, every challenge overcome, every quiet evening by the fire with Henry's hand in hers. Thomas grew into a serious, studious boy who talked about becoming a doctor someday, inspired by his mother's work. Elizabeth was bright and adventurous, always exploring, always asking questions. They had the security and love that both their parents had fought to provide. Emma gave them grandchildren, and the family continued to expand and flourish. The cabin that had once been a place of grief and pain became a gathering place for multiple generations, filled with noise and life and love. Rebecca never forgot her years of traveling nursing, the soldiers she had tended during the war, the patients who had needed her skills across the frontier. But she had learned something crucial during her time in Eureka, something that changed her understanding of healing. Sometimes the greatest medicine was not skill or knowledge or dedication to duty. Sometimes it was simply allowing yourself to be loved, to put down roots, to build a life with people who needed you not just as a healer but as yourself. She had come to Eureka to treat a wounded man. She had stayed because she found a family, a home, and a love that healed wounds she had not even known she carried. On warm summer evenings, Rebecca would sit on the porch with Henry, watching the sun set over the Nevada hills, their children playing in the yard. Henry would take her hand, and she would lean against his shoulder, and they would sit in comfortable silence. Two people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful together. The Wild West was a harsh, unforgiving place, full of danger and hardship. But it was also a place where wounded hearts could heal, where love could flourish in the most unlikely circumstances, where a traveling nurse and a widowed miner could create a family that would endure for generations. Rebecca Carson Logan had spent her youth running from pain, protecting herself from loss. But in the end, the greatest adventure of her life had been standing still, putting down roots in the hard Nevada soil, and allowing herself to be loved by Henry Logan and the family they built together. 25 years after that dusty afternoon, when she first arrived in Eureka with her medical bag and her guarded heart, Rebecca celebrated her 51st birthday surrounded by children and grandchildren, still married to the man who had called her an angel in his fevered delirium, and then taught her what it meant to truly live. She had healed his bullet wound all those years ago, but he had healed something far deeper in her, something she had thought was broken beyond repair. He had healed her heart, her capacity for trust and love and joy. And in doing so, he had given her a life richer and more meaningful than anything she could have imagined. The wound in Henry's leg had left a scar, a reminder of how close they had come to never meeting, never loving, never building this beautiful life. But scars were not ugly. They were evidence of survival, of healing, of battles won. Their love story had started with injury and fever, with fear and desperate hope. It had grown through challenges and dangers, through the everyday struggles of building a life in a harsh land. And it had endured, strengthening with each passing year, proving that the best love stories were not the easy ones but the ones where two people chose each other again and again, through everything life threw at them. As Rebecca looked around her table at the family she and Henry had created together, she felt a profound sense of gratitude and peace. She had been a good nurse, had saved many lives with her skill and dedication. But the life she had saved that mattered most was her own, rescued from loneliness and fear by a widowed father who needed help and the love that had grown between them. The nurse had come to heal wounds, but in the process, she had found something infinitely more precious. She had found home, family, and a love that would last all the days of her life and echo through the generations that followed. Their story was one of many in the Wild West, that rough and tumble time when people carved lives out of harsh land and circumstances. But it was theirs, unique and precious, a testament to the healing power of love and the courage it takes to open your heart again after loss. Henry Logan had needed a nurse after his injury. Rebecca Carson had needed a reason to stop running and start living. They had found each other at exactly the right moment, two wounded souls offering each other healing and hope. And in the end, they had built something that would outlast them both, a legacy of love that would continue in their children and grandchildren, carrying forward the lesson they had learned together in that rough Nevada mining town. Love was worth the risk. Always. Every time. That was the truth Rebecca Carson Logan carried in her heart, the wisdom she passed on to everyone she touched. She had been afraid to love again after losing her first sweetheart to war. But Henry had shown her that love lost did not have to mean love denied forever. That opening your heart again, vulnerable and terrifying as it was, could lead to joy beyond measure. The Wild West was fading by then, giving way to civilization and progress. Eureka would not always be a rough mining town. But the love story that had unfolded there, between a widowed father and the nurse who came to heal him, would be passed down through the family for generations. A reminder that sometimes the greatest adventures come not from seeking them out, but from being brave enough to stay, to love, to build something lasting in the most unlikely places. Rebecca had traveled across the country seeking purpose in her nursing work. But she had found her true purpose in a log cabin in Nevada, caring for a man and his daughter, allowing herself to be woven into their lives until the seams disappeared and they became simply family. She had come to heal wounds. She had stayed to build a life. And in doing so, she had discovered that the greatest healing of all came not from medical skill but from love, commitment, and the courage to try again even after loss had tried to break you. This was the story of Henry Logan and Rebecca Carson, two people who should have been ships passing in the night but instead became partners for life. It was a love story born in pain and fever, nurtured through danger and challenges, and sustained by daily choices to cherish and support each other. It was a story of the Wild West, but more than that, it was a story of the human heart's remarkable capacity to heal, to hope, and to love again no matter how badly it had been wounded before. And it was a story with a happy ending, the kind that lasts not just for a moment but for a lifetime and beyond, echoing through the generations as a testament to what two people can build when they are brave enough to open their hearts and strong enough to fight for the love they find. In the end, that was the greatest healing of all.